Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you how to create a simple run cycle animation. We're going to look at 4 basic positions and we're going to just kind of go through it bit by bit. And we're going to number these: 1 for the float, where you're off the ground completely. 3 is going to be the foot strike, that's where you're going to contact the ground. 5 is the mid stance, and 7 is the toe off. And actually, you'll see later, we're going to start with the foot strike. But those are the 4 basic positions. And the thing about it is the float is going to be 1 and 9 here. 3 and 11 is the foot strike. 5 and 13 is the mid stance. And 7 and 15 is the toe off. The reason we're only using odd numbers is because we should probably have twice as many drawings. As you'll see, it's going to be a little choppy. And here we've got to consider that 15 needs to lead right back into 1 there. With this run cycle, we're going to have 3 basic contact points. You're only going to ever have 1 foot on the ground at a time. And we're going to talk a little bit about stance. This guy's feet are a little closer together than the guy on the page I just showed you. And then we're going to think about head height. So the head's going to kind of bob up and down. So we look at that mid stance. It's going to go down from the foot strike, and then it's going to go back to the same place on the toe off, and then we're going to actually be above that point when we're on our float. We're flying through the air. That's going to give us the effect of bouncing up and down when we're running, which is super important. So I'm going to walk you through step by step how to do this. Make sure you orient your paper like your TV, not like your phone, because if you wanted to, you could always turn your phone, but you can't turn your TV. So we're going to always think about that landscape alignment. The very first thing we're going to do is mark the ground and our 3 contact points. Here I felt like this one's a little too close to the other one, so I'll move it. These contact points are going to be the first thing I draw on every single one of these drawings. I'm going to quick rough out a little character idea. We're not drawing any specific characters here. We're just going to focus on body type and just kind of generalizations. So here I'm kind of going for like a big burly guy, little legs, big body, big arms, blocky head. Keep it real simple. I don't want to see any fingers on this or faces. You don't need to do any of that kind of stuff right now. We're going to just focus on the big picture and the movement. So that's kind of the general idea of what I'm going to work with. Could be a barbarian. Could be a gorilla, although we're not having him walk like a gorilla. And I could think about how when he's going up and down, his body might squash and stretch a lot more than the guy above, because he's got a lot more jelly in his roll. So I'm going to start with this ground line with the 3 contact points. And I'm going to just generally roughen the whole body here, labeling it number 1. And for this one, this is going to be my foot strike. And I'm going to have a mid-height head. And I'm starting with the foot strike because it actually, I think it's easier to go down and then up from that midpoint. 2 of my drawings are at the midpoint. So I think it's easier to just kind of start at that midpoint and go a little down or a little up. That's why I think it's better to start there. All right, rough that body in. It's kind of a rounded rectangle shape. Simple foot. Allowing that leg to become the butt in the back, but in the front I'm going to show a little bit of overlap there to make it dimensional. Applying some kind of a bend where a knee would be, showing that one leg's in front of the body, one leg's behind the body. When one leg is in the front, it's going forward. The opposite arm should be going back, or the same arm should be going backwards. It should be opposing limbs move together. And that's kind of how we use our back and our hips and our torso as we twist as we run. So whatever foot's forward, the opposing arm will be what's forward. So here the near leg is forward, so the far arm will be forward. So erasing some of the construction drawing underneath, but it's important to draw it and then erase it so that you've got a good foundational structure there. So, got that. Now we need to do the second drawing. So what are we going to do? I could just guess where it is and kind of get it generally in the same place, but that would be a mistake. I've got to make sure that I trace up. I always want to trace up. So what that means is I'm going to put a piece of paper on top of the previous drawing so that my next drawing, I can line it up exactly. I line up the ground line and the 3 points. I know that this character is going to squash down because it's going to be the mid stance, the lowest head height I've got. So I'm going to just kind of roughen that same body and head shape, but move them down a little bit. And here, I'm going to have him kind of squish down, let all that mass in his stomach kind of smush down there and ball up a little more. So he's going to actually squish more than he's going to stretch, just because I feel like his body type supports it more. It's a lot more weight. Drawing that far leg, just a real simple piece of the knee, piece of the foot here. And you'll notice that I'm going to actually have the shoulder slide forward and backwards as he runs. And that's going to kind of show that sometimes we're showing more chest and sometimes we're showing more back. And I like to have this kind of bumped out thumb side of the hand. I think that's plenty to show the hand at this point, keeping it real rough. So I'm looking at where things were, moving them a little. Notice that it's still a decent amount of movement. It's not too small of a movement. Because I've got a long way to go. I've got to get all the way to the opposite side of the body in 4 drawings. This is drawing number 3, the mid stance. That's the lowest head height I've got. Trying to be careful, thinking about general proportions and everything as I go. So now I'm going to speed it up, and I'm going to go ahead and do the next 2 drawings real quick. It's at 400 speed now. So I'm going to use here I'm using for the toe off. I'm going to actually look at both drawing number 1 and drawing number 3. Drawing number 1 will show me where that mid height is. So I'm using it to get my mid height, but then I'm going to look at drawing number 3 to see where his arms should have been, and I'm going to kind of base it off of that. So you can kind of use a combination of those 2 drawings. The body at 1 and the body at 5 are kind of in the same position. It's my float, so I'm going to actually be off the ground. I raise him up, but I feel like maybe I stretched out his torso a little, but maybe I did it too much, so I'm going to kind of pull him back down a little bit. Again, showing one leg's in front of the body, one leg's in the back. Here comes that shoulder moving forward. It's in the middle position right now of the body. Opposing leg and arms. Alright, so now I've got the first 4 drawings. Now I'm going to switch sides. And drawing number 1 and and the drawing on the opposite side, 7, are going to be the same, more or less, but with different feet and arms forward, the opposite side. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to make some small variations as they twist and turn, thinking about how their shoulder and hip points might have pivoted a little more, because I think that's an important thing to do. But before I do that, I'm just going to generally lightly rough in a trace of that drawing number 1. Using a light touch, and I'll start pushing it a little more here. So when I draw that front foot, I'm going to keep most of it in a similar position. Here again, I want that shoulder to be in the middle-ish, because that's where my shoulder was on the last drawing. But when I did number 1, it was a little closer to the back. So that's something to keep in mind. I might move a little bit on some of these as a body twists in space. Here I'm talking about that opposing arms and legs thing, looking at how, if I was looking at the top of the character, like top down, the line of the shoulders and the line of the hips might almost make an X. And you'll see, I'll kind of show you that in a minute. I'll draw that X off to the side here. I think it's important to remember that the butt is the leg. And when the leg goes back, that's when the butt kind of bulges up. And when the leg stretches out, that's when the butt kind of smooths into the back. So I'm changing the arm a little, making it a little more extended here from what it was in the previous drawing. It's important to have a little bit of variety, or you get a strobing effect if you trace them too exactly, and it's also not true because they kind of shift how they interact with the body. We're not doing a true profile here. We're thinking about it at a profile, but slightly a profile. And there's that X the shoulders and the hips make. When my arm is forward, I'm showing more at the back. When my arm's back, I'm showing more of the chest, and then I'm showing more of the crotch or more of the butt. And that's opposite, because we're kind of twisting. So our shoulder line and our hip line are going to be opposed. All right. So I'm going to just kind of use the next drawing, the drawing that was right before it, and then I'm also going to use the drawing that's the opposite of it to build my best drawings. I'm just kind of sketching them out real quick. Well, not this quick. At 400 times speed again. And I find it helpful to shade out the far leg and arm. I think it looks better, but really it's just a helpful tool to help you understand what's going on and remember which one's in the front, which one's in the back. Long run, it makes it look better too, but the real benefit is just that you don't have to guess which one's which, because you just know. Sometimes on this, when the arms are in this crossing position, both arms are almost in the same position. It gets a little confusing because you can't see so much of the opposite drawing, so you kind of just have to do your best there. The final drawing's a float. And then I'll show you guys a little quick test of these. I use a stop motion app on my phone. I have an iPhone, so I use iMotion HD. But I found lots of different stop motion apps for all kinds of Android and everything else. It works just fine. So any stop motion app, just make sure you use the onion skin feature so you can see what you drew before. It's almost like the tracing up, but for stop motion.